Hi, guys. Welcome to Real Food Recovery. We are so happy to be here. And this is actually a topic that I am super excited about. I say that every time, but I really mean it this time. So before we get started, though, Jamie, how's it going?
I'm It's going well, and
Good.
very happy to be here.
Wonderful. So, if you are here with us as well, chances are you or someone you love or know is working through recovery from the effects of ultra processed food use disorder. That's a given. But today we're going to tackle a huge topic that intertwines with that, and that is insulin resistance. We're going
Yes.
to get into details of what it is, how it is created in our bodies, and how to reverse it. So, Jamie, whenever you hear about insulin resistance, do you get a visceral reaction to that? Do you have a moment that comes up from your life or someone you have known that has faced challenges because of that?
No, not visceral, but just, it's something that, people should be aware of. So that's why we wanted to do this episode.
Yeah.
I think it's important. Again, if I think about how, my own process with this, with insulin, it can change, it can morph through your lifetime and as you age. And I think it's important to understand all the ins and outs of it. And for my perspective, it's something that I really believe deeply ties to how you eat.
Oh,
And yes, you can predisposed for insulin resistance, but that just, as they say, it just genetics loads the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger.
yeah.
So
I had a family member who was pre-diabetic, and they said you can change your lifestyle, change how you eat, or you can take the Mounjaro. I'll take the pill. So, or the shot. So anyway, yeah, they could have gone the way of changing lifestyle, but people don't always want to do that.
no.
So I have been lucky to have avoided the insulin resistance, but insulin and diabetes are a big topic for me because I lost my grandmother, my favorite grandmother, to diabetes. She had become blinded from the disease, and it wasn't like this big traumatic thing with her because nobody was like wailing and throwing themselves on the ground when this was happening around me. But I still knew as a child even that this was upsetting. And when we would come from out of town, she would just pat us up and down. That was her way of greeting us to get to know us, head and shoulders, knees and toes. And it was just a really tender moment every time I saw her. And she was always so kind to me. So, diabetes is a very tender place in my heart, and I take it very seriously. So, ironically, I suffer more from the hypoglycemia. And so, again, today we're just going to break it all down, and we're going to talk about what insulin resistance really is, because sometimes we throw that word around and people don't really understand what it is. So we're going to talk about how it happens and what it does to our bodies, and most importantly, what we can do about it. And I think people will be very pleasantly surprised to hear the answer to that. So,
Yes. So again, let's start with the basics. What is insulin? Insulin is a hormone made by our pancreas that helps move glucose or sugar from the bloodstream into our cells for energy. And when everything's working right, insulin keeps our blood sugar stable. But when we eat ultra processed foods, especially high in refined sugars and processed fats, our bodies are constantly flooded with glucose, and our pancreas has to keep pumping out more and more insulin.
right.
And really, insulin is the fat storage hormone. I mean, that's the best way to understand um, insulin. And that's why insulin resistance, if you have that, it means that your body receptors and your cells don't recognize insulin. So your pancreas has to pump out more and more of this fat storage hormone in order for your cells to receive the message that it's in there, or that it's circulating. So a lot of times you can have one or two things happen: either too much fat in the cell or too much, glucose in the cell. And either way, insulin can't do its job. So there's, in some camps, my camp for a long time was, very, very low fat. So insulin could get into the cells and take care of the glucose. Or in other camps, it's very, very low glucose, low carb, so that the fat, it doesn't block the insulin. There's really no need for insulin to be circulating in the blood. For me, one of the side effects of my vegan lifestyle was I was very susceptible to a lot of bug bites which told me that my blood sugar, as much of the fruit and grains and starches that I was eating on the vegan lifestyle, I was eating very clean, but a lot of carbohydrates. It was very high carb, very moderate protein, and low fat. And I noticed that I couldn't leave the house for even a second to get the mail or something simple without coming back with like 15 bug bites. And because the blood was just sitting the blood was sitting in my system, in my circulating. It was not getting, excuse me, the sugar, not the blood. The sugar was sitting in my system, circulating in my blood. So it could not get into the cells. Um, so yes, I was very insulin sensitive, but my bloodstream was filled with sugar from all of the starches I was eating. Again, I'm not demonizing these whole foods. What I'm saying is know your body. And that was an indication of my body not being able to handle and process all of that, all of those starches and sugars that I was intaking. So know
I'm
your
just
body.
I'm just picturing calamine lotion sitting
Oh,
inside the front door when you come in from getting the mail.
please. It was all the time, all the time. But when I first moved here, I would just cry because I was in so much pain from bug bites, which is a thing, right? That's one of the ways to know you're insulin resistant, right? Because the glucose is still circulating in your bloodstream. It's not getting into your cells.
Yeah, interesting. Well, before we get any further into this, I want to point out that insulin, as you talked about, is the fat storage hormone. So if you've got that high blood sugar zipping around all day long, tain't good for weight loss.
Mhm.
So if that is the case, then your likelihood of obesity skyrockets. And I want to make sure and share this quote from Dr. Mark Hyman. I thought this was pretty good. And I think everybody will be as shocked to hear some of these statistics as I was. He says, insulin resistance is the hidden epidemic driving muscle loss, metabolic dysfunction, and accelerated aging. More than 90% of people with insulin resistance have no idea they have it. It's a silent disruptor contributing to sarcopenia or age related muscle loss, inflammation, weight gain, and a cascade of chronic diseases, including heart disease, dementia, and type 2 diabetes. The average American now consumes over 150 pounds of sugar and 130 pounds of flour per year, with 60% of daily calories coming from ultra processed food. This metabolic disaster isn't just affecting adults. Kids now, as young as 3 years old, are being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. The fix is to become insulin sensitive versus resistant. And I love this next statement. Food is the most powerful tool to reverse insulin resistance. Foods that are rich in whole, nutrient dense, and blood sugar balancing foods restores insulin sensitivity and optimizes metabolism. Metabolo- metabolic, 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 we should do a blooper reel.
Yeah, right.
Metabolic health is longevity. The sooner you take control, the better your future will be. When you hear about those statistics, do you get a reaction from that? What do you think about when you hear all that? I mean, kids
Yeah,
starting at 3.
I've been hearing these stats for so long, none of it really surprises me anymore. It's very sad.
I,
Very sad.
I know. I just wish I had a magic wand to wave around the whole earth and uh, drop toxic chemicals on those ultra processed food plants.
I
um,
would say from, again, just it reminds me to always take care of
yeah,
the responsibility for your health falls to you. No one is going to do it for you. Certainly not the government. So don't rely on them.
amen. And when we hear about 3-year-olds, I'm looking at the parents going, "What are you doing?
Mhm.
What are you doing? Are you thinking you're giving kids treats?" It kills me. It's very painful to see children that are in that situation. But before I knew about insulin resistance, I recognized that after sugar bin, how I felt that nausea, diaphoretic, shaky, weak, hot, and ironically, still wanting more sugar. So the signs were clear for me that I had taken my pancreas on a ride and it was just screaming, "Whoa, Nelly." I just didn't have the language to put it all together. It was that huge spike and then that dramatic drop, and it left me unable to function. And then you're out of it for the rest of the day.
Right.
Super big bummer. And then I just could not be productive for several hours after that. But at the time, my addiction would drive me to consume regardless of the consequences, which ironically is exactly the definition of addiction. But in the moment, I felt like I needed it or I might die. And I have heard a saying recently that craving, that need, that desire for more, it feels like a brain that is just starved for oxygen. And when you're, I don't know if you've ever choked or been out of breath, but you would just do anything to
That's right.
just be able to catch your breath again. I've had a few choking incidents, and it is absolutely the most terrifying. It's so terrifying for me that I say my prayers every night, please don't let me choke again, because it was that traumatic. So that's how the brain is functioning to that level of panic and desperation. So we're dealing with a couple of different things here that set the stage for insulin resistance to set in. And I was wondering, Jamie, do you have those same classic insulin resistant responses of those low energy crashes,
Yeah.
exhaustion, cranky, and continued cravings?
Yes, that's how I found my way into this, into this world of understanding the impact of processed foods on my health and processed food, that use disorder, the eating disorder that I have. That whole journey is what led me into recovery from my eating disorder.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
so for me, yeah, it was the realization that I was moody and I was very my moods were I was not able to predict how I would feel, and I couldn't choose my emotion, right? It's like something
Wow.
else would take over. And that was very foreign to me because I'd always been able to just set my mind on something and it would play out that way as far as, what I could control, my moods, my outlook, my perspective, my self-talk. And whenever I would have, the roller coaster of processed foods, all of that would go away. And I became, instead of someone who was empowered, I became somebody who was, sort of under an influence, which is why Paige and I talk about the addictive response in our bodies and brains of, to ultra processed and processed foods.
Yeah. No, I agree so much. And that was a very big statement. When you're not in control of your moods are controlling you. Terrifying,
Mhm.
right? Who
Mhm.
wants to live in that body of, like you said, the emotional roller coaster is a disaster. Nobody wants a ticket for that show.
Nope.
So when you are stuck in this spiral of how am I going to pull out of this and how will I ever reverse all the damage that I've done, the only good news floating around those thoughts is when you are about to hit rock bottom, that that spot is, you feel like you are in the depths of hell, and you're more open to ideas of how to pull out of the life you are living, and you're willing to consider taking a deeper look at reality and options for recovery. And it sounds like you were saying that that really was a catalyst for you to start making changes. And you have to know that on some level, when you're in the middle of that cascade of roller coastering, that's not normal, and no
Mhm.
one wants to feel bad.
Right.
So in one sense it can become a motivator for change. So that being the case, and now we understand what insulin does, let's talk about what actually triggers insulin insulin resistance. And the biggest factor that we are coming to find out are the ultra processed foods. Big drum
Yes.
roll. I mean, you had to
Yes.
see that coming, right?
Exactly. So the constant flood of sugar, refined grains, and industrial seed oils keeps insulin levels high, making our cells resistant to it over time. And the dopamine connection is huge here. So these foods
Mhm.
don't just affect metabolism, they can hijack our brain's reward system. And again, this was shared with me in the very first way Dr. Joan Iflin's talk that she gave years ago. I happened to run into it on YouTube. She gave it at a low carb conference.
Ah,
Gosh, maybe 2017, 18, 19, somewhere in there. And I ran into the, just stumbled onto it and heard a lot of my own behaviors that she described when she described her own struggle in processed food. And that connected me with the need for recovery that was specific, not just relationship recovery, not just recovery of, my connection to myself or my connection to my higher power that I call God, but really the relationship that I had with food. That was my first foray into eating, my, acknowledgement of my eating disorder.
mhm.
And again, I didn't call it that back then. I called it food addiction, but it's for me clearly an eating disorder. And that is something that when my disordered brain takes over, trying to control this insulin response in the body, that's when I will white knuckle everything around me trying to control what's happening in my body.
Yeah, I know. I think the science behind it, see, I think it makes a huge difference. It just puts things in a different light, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So the science made a big impact on me too, not just because I understood what was clearly happening in my body, but as Jamie says, I was reacting exactly like my body
Oh
was.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm normal, right?
Totally.
That puts me in
Totally.
the
Nobody reacts any differently, even including, people like you, Paige, when you were a little girl, like you were talking about how you were very spindly and wiry and could eat whatever and it didn't really impact you. My husband's the same way. He's in his 50s and he's the same way. And but I will watch him, his moods will get impacted. He will get irritable. He will get, angry about things that don't really normally irritate him. And I won't say anything, but I'll observe like, well, he just had a gigantic bowl of processed junk an
hmm
hour ago. So yeah, he's on a roller coaster.
You make a good point about that's our weight isn't the only measuring tool, right?
No,
That there's a whole lot of
no.
other things
Insulin
going.
resistance can be in someone, it does not matter what their body shape is.
hmm That's why it's so sneaky, right? That's why that quote from Dr. Harmon said that there's 90% of the people don't understand that they have it. So once I understood the science behind that, it took away the guilt that I was just weak, but it also created the thought that, okay, so now what do I do
Now
about
what?
this? How do I
Yeah,
fight back? I wanted to fight back. And I was furious that I was in this spot and living with, I call it a food addicted brain because it has consumed most of my life. But I was still relieved at the same time because finally I knew what I was dealing with. Huge amount of relief in that, and it provided direction for me of where to go next. And I often wonder what the world would actually be like if there was no such thing as processed food. Because think about all the people out there operating in very big positions that probably are suffering from these addictions as
yeah,
well. And because they have to be having those same experiences that I was having. So, this is partly why Jamie and I do what we do. And I am thinking we might even have world peace if it weren't for processed food. I mean, I'm kidding, but not kidding. Don't you think it would make a big impact on this entire world?
for sure.
But
For
sadly, the
sure.
bottom line with insulin resistance is that it makes it so much harder to feel full and satisfied. So you're eating and eating, but the cells still are not getting any nourishment. So
Mhm.
that's a conundrum. And the problem with that is when that's the situation, the addiction goes searching for solutions, even if the consequences make it worse. So we were talking about how you fight back. Do you have a way in your arsenal that you're like, I'm not going to put up with this. I'm fighting back. What do you?
Uh, for me, I'm very mindful of what I bring into my home.
Yeah.
Um, and there was a period of time, I would say now that I'm sort of doing a little bit more recovery work in this area, there was a part of time, probably I'd say maybe 2, 3 years right before, and like the first couple of years in COVID, where I would, be very militant about, my environment, or, I would try to control everything around me. And that's insane. That's insane. You can't control the food environment. You can't control every time you leave your house and there's 30 fast food places on your route. You just can't control those things. So, and you certainly, trying to think you can control, leaves left me not wanting to leave the house, and that's insane. So I got to the point for my recovery where I looked at, okay, what are my choices? What am I allowing it in my environment, like in my home, around me? And there are days when I can have it around and that doesn't bother me. But I wouldn't bring it into the house and just leave it there. Um, if I'm not going to be able to eat it without effects, negative effects. So
Mhm.
that's my barometer. And there are some parts of the day or parts of the week or certain workouts and other things that I'll have certain foods that I know are going to empower that process for me. And I'll allow them, in as part of my diet, but those are still minimally processed things. We're not talking about ultra processed or highly processed foods.
Mhm.
Um, Now, when you leave the house, right, you have to have enough recovery tools on board that those those cues around you don't bother you. Because if you're
Yeah.
letting those cues bother you, I mean, I'm letting my eating disorder run my life, and that's not sustainable for me.
Yeah.
That is letting my eating disorder run my life by being afraid to live is an indication that I'm in my disorder. So I need to, I've worked very hard on how to find balance, some days better than others for sure.
We need
Um,
to do a podcast on that topic. That's huge.
yeah. And so again, this is learned over time and it's changed. I've taken one step forward and two steps back many times. And then sometimes I'll take two forward and one back. So um just be mindful that it's not going to be linear. It's gonna, nobody, the astronauts didn't get to the moon by going in one direct path without deviating from it. And
I think they call that the hokey pokey.
yeah, and you're not going to get there either that way. You're just not. It's not going to be recovery from using these foods is not going to be a linear line from point A to point B and you're done.
No, there'd be no lessons in that.
Yeah. So Paige, do you want to talk about what happens in the body when insulin resistance sort of sets in?
Yeah, but I want to make a comment on what you said about not having food in the house because I live with someone that can have a bite or two and then just leave it there till it rots or molds. But with ultra processed food, it's going to
It never
stick
does.
around for a year before it goes bad. My husband just bought this marshmallow dippy stuff for him to dip his strawberries in, and it's in the refrigerator and it's been there for 3 weeks. And he ate a few bites and then he's done with it. And then I'm like, I'll talk to him tonight when he gets home and say, can we throw this out now? Because I've had to deal with that every time I open the refrigerator for 3 weeks and it's just sitting there. Ugh.
Mhm.
Anyway, yes, I would love to talk about what happens in the body when insulin resistance set in. So we've touched on it briefly, but this is kind of an overview. First, you've got constant hunger and cravings. We talked about that. Your
Mhm.
body just isn't using sugar properly. So it keeps signaling you to eat more so it can get more sugar, but it still just stays in the bloodstream and is not driven into the cells. It's basically, if you get it down to a really scientific level, it's the receptors that can't quite pull things in. It's like a door that's jammed and you're trying to open it, but there's like a weight or something. It just makes it a lot harder to get the sugar into the cell or the glucose. And then there's the fatigue and the brain fog. When your cells aren't getting the energy they need, you just feel drained all the time. And it's not just energy, it also affects hormones, inflammation, and even mental health. You talked a little bit about connecting your mood swings to when you are eating. Do you want to share anything more about that?
No, I mean, really, that is the biggest way for me to make sure that I'm, balanced and calm is to make sure that I'm just, not eating any of the processed foods that would affect my moods. And again, that's I think the biggest for me, the biggest thing that I have control over is how I choose and what I choose to eat, really does affect every other aspect of my personality. So it's just a good reminder to
Oh,
stay on track.
yeah, I like that idea of food is a representative of your personality.
Mhm.
That's really true, right? So something I didn't connect on before was how insulin resistance also affects our sleep. but they are very closely linked because poor sleep, whether it's insufficient sleep, disrupted sleep, or poor quality sleep, can negatively impact how the body processes glucose. Let me do a quick explanation of that. We've got hormonal imbalances that come through this. So sleep deprivation disrupts hormones like insulin, cortisol, and ghrelin. This can lead to increased hunger, cravings, and reduced insulin sensitivity, making it harder for cells to absorb the glucose. Also, there's an increased stress response. So lack of sleep raises the cortisol levels, which can promote insulin resistance over time. Then we've got reduced glucose tolerance. So studies show that even a single night of poor sleep can impair the body's ability to regulate blood sugar, increasing the risk of insulin resistance. And then lastly, chronic sleep issues, which are horrible. Over time, chronic sleep deprivation can contribute to weight gain, obesity, and type 2 diabetes, all of which are closely tied to insulin resistance. Have you found that any nighttime habits that you have, like meal timing or relaxation routines, that they made a noticeable difference in your sleep quality
Yeah.
or metabolic health?
Yeah, for sure. Like eating too close to bed, for sure. I will not sleep as
Yep.
well. I'm not militant about it, but I try to get 3 hours in between sleep and eating.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, and I just noticed that I'm not tired. I'm not really tired for bed until 3 hours after my last meal.
Oh,
And if I don't, like my last meal last night was 7:30 at night. Well, 8 o'clock, I was done eating. So just because I had meetings, I did not have time to eat before. And I had my meal planned and I just got back from my meetings and cooked it and ate it, but it was um I was up probably till after 11. And that's just
oof.
because I wasn't tired. So and I don't eat sugar or caffeine or anything that would, stimulant wise, that would keep me up. So it really was just not wanting to sleep because my body was still busy. Um, so just being mindful of what that looks like. And then sure enough, I don't really, I set an absolute last alarm that I have to let myself get up for. But I don't set those early alarms anymore because if my body needs sleep, I let it sleep. So I have an alarm that I set most mornings, not the weekends, but most mornings. That is like an absolute last call, cannot sleep past this time. And anything, if I wake up before that, great. But usually I don't. And I'll go
Mhm.
to bed many times way before 11, but that's just what my body is doing. It needs the rest. So I'll listen to it, and it rests better when I don't have a full stomach.
Oh, yeah, me too.
A
I'm
bit of
like
a,
you. Go ahead.
no, finish your thought.
Yeah, if I can even have 4 hours, that is even bet that hurts to lay down with stuff in your gut for me.
Mhm.
As
Yeah.
I've gotten older, I've become much more sensitive to that.
Mhm. And the other
So,
thing too is waking up, right? Waking up, thinking about how you feel waking up. Um, you want to feel spry and you want to feel, light when you wake up too. Like you don't want to wake up with a hangover from the food you ate the night before or the day before. Something to
yeah.
keep.
Yeah. So one last thing we want to touch on when it comes to balancing blood sugar, and that's stress. Big shocker there, right? When I am constantly stressed, my blood sugar is all over the place. No matter how well I eat, I have come to learn that it is all connected. Everything in our body is all connected. So stress is such a powerful factor with this. Have you noticed those specific moments in your life when stress really seemed to take control of your blood sugar, or has it affect other areas of your life? You want to touch on that?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure it has. I never really measured the stress impact, but I could definitely just notice it. And the way that I was processing food, or that, especially if I was eating a lot of fiber, I wouldn't process it as well. Stress would impact my certainly my gut health, my sleep, which impacts food intake the next day. So it is all connected for sure.
Hmm.
So let's get into these simple solutions. What actually helps reverse insulin resistance?
Okay, well, big drum roll again. As we mentioned in the beginning from Mark Hyman's quote, the solution is pretty basic. First, cutting out ultra processed foods. So protein, fiber, and healthy fat should be the foundation of every meal, and movement is huge. Jamie taught me this one about even a short 10-minute walk after meals helps lower blood sugar. When I eat enough protein and fiber, my cravings go way down. It's like my body isn't begging for sugar anymore. Do you notice a difference in your cravings when you live that way?
Yes, for sure. And I will try to bookend workouts or activity with things that have, like fruits and veggies and things that have more fiber and a good whack of protein with it. And that helps me, I think my blood sugar stay balanced before and after activity. But the rest of the day, um, I will focus on protein, a little bit of fiber and healthy fat.
Yeah.
And that helps keep the roller coaster of cravings and all of the other. I don't get the spikes and crashes anymore because I don't eat junk. But when I, during the day, if I want to feel my best, not around activity time, not around a workout, I want to feel my best. It's really for me, protein, fat, and a little bit of fiber with it.
Yeah. I agree. I like to say in a perfect world, I like my pancreas to be on vacation doing the, back float in the pool, just relaxing all day because I mean, if you ate appropriately, you could almost go without the pancreas because or go without insulin because that's you wouldn't need it. But the reason we need it is because we can't keep that blood sugar controlled in that 80 to 120 level at all times. So that would
Well,
be a
yeah, and
perfect
we're
world.
not meant to, right? There's going to be stress in life. There's going to be all
Yeah.
the things that we can't control. So, we have to have a working pancreas, but I think that when that pancreas crashes or can't function the way that it needs to, it can lead to all other issues, all kinds of other issues
Yeah.
downstream. Well, not to mention type 1 diabetes, but
Right.
of course, the type 2.
I know. And I find that fascinating that we can have type 2 diabetes and it can be completely controlled by your diet and never even need medication. That's how powerful food is. It's medicine. Food is medicine. So I just think it's amazing how, with a couple of changes, your body will start responding. And it's astonishing how forgiving our body can be when we cooperate and do the things as it was designed to do. So let's take a few audience questions before we wrap up. Jamie, you want to take the first one?
I eat healthy most of the time, but I still get crazy cravings at night. What can I do? Well, I don't know what I eat healthy most of the time is because one person's healthy is not another person's healthy. And healthy is a very general word and it
Mm.
can be misconstrued and misinterpreted all the time. Um, so, I would need more information on what this person's actually eating, but I can probably suss out that they're not eating enough protein, they're not eating enough maybe healthy fats, probably not enough fiber if they're getting cravings, right? Because if you're getting cravings, that's an indication that you're out of balance in some way, shape, or form. And it could just be, it might not be that day. It might be from the day before. I had a day Sunday that was very busy and I had lots of different time constrictions that I wasn't used ready for. And so I didn't eat my normal meals at my normal times. And I didn't get nearly enough protein that day. And so the next 2 days I was craving well, I knew I was craving protein, but years ago when I didn't know how to discern that, I would just think I was craving, and of course I would go for the foods that were most palatable and most available, and that's the hyper and ultra processed stuff. So I would select those foods, and
Hmm.
I would get in the cycle of the spike and crash and wanting more. But I really wasn't initially craving those foods. I was initially craving probably protein and nutrients. So if anyone says to me, I'm having cravings or I I I'm eating what I'm being told to eat, but I still want to eat more, you're probably overfed and undernourished. So
Good statement.
you're not really full, right? Your body does not have what it needs. So keep eating, single ingredient protein filled, healthy fat and fiber rich foods until you're satiated.
Yeah. That brilliant answer because it will come
Yes,
sooner than
all
later
the time. All the
if you
time.
eat like that. Yeah, it's just impossible to not have that happen.
Yeah.
Good answer. So the next question, how long does it take to reverse insulin resistance? And so it depends on the person, but many people see improvements within a few weeks when they consistently eat whole foods like Jamie was just talking about and move a little more and manage stress. I'm telling you, the body is very kind, very,
Mhm.
very kind to us when we do what we're supposed to do. When we do what is meant to be done as how the body was designed.
Yes. Yes. Well said. Third question, can you fix insulin resistance without giving up all carbs? So that depends. It depends on what you're willing to do. So I'm in the camp of do what you, like Chef AJ says, do the least restrictive food plan that you can stick to and not have any, resistance on, right? That's the food plan for you. And PS, that might change for you as you age. So for many young women, it's very popular to do the whole food, plant-based, vegan thing. It's very popular. Their bodies are extremely insulin sensitive. And for those of them like me who had weight issues in their past, um, the trick is you can eat, those or plant foods are high in carbohydrate in general. You can eat those plant foods, but the trick is to be extremely low in fat. So you are giving up one for another. If you want to have, carbs and starches, fruits, vegetables, starchy vegetables, and starches like breads, pastas, beans. PS beans are not protein, they're starches. Um, you can have all of those things ad libitum if you don't have any fat anywhere around you and in any state that you live next to. Like you just can't. You just can't. It cannot be anywhere near your time zone. The key is it's funny, but it's true. The key is you that glucose has to get into your cells. And if you're eating too much glucose, like I was, and my body wasn't able to process it, it'll just stay in your bloodstream.
Yeah.
So be mindful of that. Be mindful of that. The best combination, if you're eating a whole food, plant-based, high carb, very low fat diet, which is for some people a powerhouse, um, the key is to always move. So your body uses the glucose in
Yeah.
your system.
Mm-hmm.
Keep moving. Keep moving
Mm-hmm.
after every meal, move during the day, get some walking done, move. The other flip side, of that is remembering that over time your gut might change. Our guts change. And so what was, once very healthy for your gut may over time actually become very hard and detrimental to your gut. And you can develop gut permeability that can lead to leaky gut. And then the nutrients that you're eating in large, vast quantities can no longer be absorbed. And
Mm-hmm.
that's happened to me at the end of my vegan journey. I've actually read a few stories recently that just, because our phones are always listening, popped up in my feed that, there's some major influencers that are saying they can't do the whole food plant-based thing anymore because their gut changed and they can't absorb what they're eating.
Oh.
And so they're becoming extremely nutrient deficient, and that's starting to have all kinds of downstream effects on their bodies. Um, it's just again, remember, don't get too attached like I did to one way of eating. The last thing I'll say about this is you can look at the low carb side of the world, right? And I've lived on that extreme to help heal my gut. Yes, you will give up all carbohydrates, but you will replace that with fat. So again, there's benefit to that because your body becomes fat adapted and runs on fat, your own body fat and the fat that you're feeding it. So there's benefits there that I found a lot more satiety with that way of eating, but you're missing nutrients. So you have to be mindful of what micro and macronutrients, what the ratios are for you, and make sure that for me, it was very important to eat my green vegetables, non-starchy vegetables, and in ways that my body would tolerate those vegetables. Eat those, incorporate those with your protein and your fat. And yes, you can fix insulin resistance. And I go back to what AJ says about making sure it's whatever you do is sustainable. So if you
Right.
fix your insulin resistance and you can't sustain that diet, and you want, you're on very low carb and you want to I don't know, you want a cookie, you want a dessert out, you want your Aunt Mildred's homemade apple pie at Christmas. I get it. And you should be able to have that because those are foods that are high value to you. You should be able to have one of those things a few times a year. Keep in mind that if something the way you're eating is not sustainable, that you can incorporate those foods without going off the rails, great. If you can't, then that tells you that maybe there's a middle ground.
Yeah.
Maybe insulin resistance, and it can be. Insulin resistance can be fixed with a middle ground, with moderate carbohydrate intake, high protein, and moderate to low fat. But it takes a lot more self-awareness to balance that.
Mhm.
Some people do better on the extreme sides for a period of time, and others do better right in the middle. You have to know yourself.
That's what we continue to preach, right? Which is why we don't give people food plans. We just say
Exactly.
non-processed foods. Would behoove me to ever tell anybody what is good for their body or good
Yeah.
for them
It's all
to eat.
different. We don't know what your gut looks
Yeah.
like.
So we just
Or,
have a guideline that we direct people away from ultra processed foods for several reasons, not just weight loss, but health in general, mental health, all of it. So quickly, someone asked, is insulin resistance the same as diabetes? Good question, but no, it can lead to type 2 diabetes if it's not addressed. But the good news is it's reversible with lifestyle change, which we've talked about and is
yeah,
excellent news. Good talk.
definitely.
This great topic. Good for everyone to hear.
I agree. I agree. Thank you all for joining us today.
Yep. And if you want to find out more about us, you can find us at realfoodrecovery4u.com. That's the number 4 and the letter U. And we'll see you next time, guys. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.